All right, welcome back. Welcome back. My name is Kari, and I teach people how to take back control of their lives when things don't work out for them quite the way they thought they would. I especially focus on burnout, which can be a huge cause of why we start over. And I am doing a series of videos. I've got 10 guests, 10 special guests for 10 weeks only, leading us into the new year where I've got some new things that we are planning on. So I'm going to bring my guest in here for today.
We are waiting for, there we go. Hello.
Hi, how's it going?
Uh, Good.
Good.
I was sharing our meeting here to get some more people to join us. All right. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm so happy to have you on here, everybody. This is my friend Hannah. So Hannah, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Okay, my name's Hannah Gordon. How much of an introduction do you want? Like,
Whatever you
what do
want.
I? Oh, I'm a very direct person, so if I have opinions, they will be stated, and I feel very comfortable with people having different opinions because then that means we have more dialogue.
Excellent.
I am a nurse turned naturopathic doctor, currently in school to do nurse practitioner because politics haven't caught up. I like to be a leader, but don't need to be. I love travel. It's my passion. I make it a huge, and yeah, how about
All
that?
right. Awesome. So yeah, I put a call out there to talk to people who made major life changes in their life, and you answered that call, and you were like, "Yes, that's totally me all day long." So I want to talk a little bit about your story and some of the changes that you've been through. So, can you give us kind of maybe a highlight reel of what we're going to be talking about here today?
Yeah, so I guess the most recent flip the table situation, I think I probably do that every couple of years, is last year I had stayed in a job way too long, was getting bullied, all the things, COVID hit, layers of layers. And I decided I'd looked at all the angles and I can go into more depth with that for the reasons for change, but technically got to a spot where nothing was working and I had to leave. So the brief is I quit my job a year ago, left, then packed up my bags, packed everything into my storage unit, and then
Wow.
left in 2.5 months later after making the decision, drove across the country for a month, did a lot of therapeutic grounding and being in the deserts and the national parks and outside and away from humans. Did that for about a month and then moved home to Tennessee. So I kind of was trying on a state. I've been an adult in a lot of different states, and was kind of reassessing family and home, where I was birthed. So I went and did that for about 6 months, had a wonderful time with family. And then technically my adult self has brought me back to the West Coast, back to Seattle, which is where I intend to stay. And I am trying out all the new things. I started school. I adjusted some leadership things. I have 4 different jobs. I teach at a medical institution. I do
All
nursing
right.
community health center. So I'm trying on all the things. So that's kind of the
Yeah.
brief of that.
Yeah. Wow. So you're pretty much still in the middle of this current life change that you're going through, right?
Yes, agreed.
Yes. So, you know, I'm always curious about where people are in terms of what they're feeling really in those moments before, or perhaps the months before they decide to make a life change, to try to tell people, hey, if you're maybe feeling this sort of way, you might be heading down this path. So a year ago, how would you say we're feeling about just life in general? What state of mind were you in, I guess?
Yeah, I still struggle sometimes with my feeling words, so I'll attempt. But I was stuck. I couldn't go
Mm.
anywhere. I was stagnant. I was stifled. I was not seen. I felt insignificant. I felt like a
Uh-huh.
dot kind of thing. And I think for me, the lack of motion or movement towards a direction, doesn't bode well for my mental health. So I visualized myself almost like bumping into all the walls, and I kept trying them on to see like if something broke through. And technically the only exit was up or out. There was not really a way through any of it. It was just complete removal of myself from my current surroundings in pretty much every aspect. So a lot of stagnation, yeah, feelings.
Yeah. No, I I hear that too, and I'm sure other people are familiar where it just feels like you hit a wall in life and you just go, where do I go from here, right? I think a lot of people will connect with that. So you decided to make a lot of different changes. I think I heard there was a couple of back and forth moves there, some time on the road with exploring and travel. So you're in the middle of this process, which is great. I think you're the first one I've talked to who's been in the middle. So as you're going through this, have there been any challenges for you along the way and after you made that move?
For sure. I am not one that says I get scared very often, and definitely this past year has been more fearful than I've probably felt in a very long time. Some of that is related to the amount of change. I love change, but then I probably did too much at one time, potentially, and started a lot of things. So definitely fear has been, unfortunately, part of that, but I think that's something good to work through and be in the middle of that for this year.
Yeah. Yeah, what do you think the fear is, or can you define that a little more for us?
Yeah, I think the fear was lack of direction. I
Oh.
have don't experience that. I know exactly where I'm going at all times. And if I turn down the wrong road, I don't really care because something else will be down there for me to explore and figure out. But I think a lot of it is where it feels like I have a lot of directions, which is cool. But I don't know that I'm going down all of them.
Yeah. So it's the opposite then. You started out where you felt stuck and now you've just got all the options in front of you.
Yes.
Yeah. So I heard you say too though that you're kind of testing and exploring. How has that been for you?
It's a lot of new learning curves at one time. And even for my personality, it feels like a little too much. We all have our own things, right? That can be too much or too little for individuals. But I think I started 4 new jobs in the span of 2 weeks and was like, that seems like a lot. And they're pretty high complex jobs. So it's all in medical and a lot of decision making, as well as teaching and teaching new material. So I would offer my brain feels a little too full in the executive functioning realm, but at the same time, it's really forcing me to listen to my body when I'm done and when I'm tired. And I have a really difficult time doing that sometimes. Like I don't have a stop gate because I'm like, ooh, more, more, more. I get to learn. Awesome. If I'm learning, I'm good to go. But I've now reached a point where like too much learning at one time in a small window is a little bit much. Yeah.
But what you're learning here, are you learning more about yourself and some things, a little self-discovery on this journey as well?
For sure. I think me being able to sample a lot is going
Yeah.
to push me in more of a direction where I will be a little more a fulfilled employee, a fulfilled human being, because I do require a little bit of variability and change, but I need direction within that too. So it's really helping me hone in my skills on what I think I want to do for next steps. And I'm going to mess with all of it. I still feel very strongly that even the next year is still me messing in the middle to figure out what my next steps are. And if I don't do that, if I don't kind of dawdle or like I'm sinking a little bit, I don't think for me personality wise, I won't do justice until I do that so that I can step into the next phase of my life for however long that lasts, which
Yeah, and I want to tap into that too because you're out here trying and exploring and you're saying there's a lot of new learning curves. And I know that like a lot of people might have a challenge with that and stepping into a lot of different things and testing a lot of different things. But what would you say to them as far as taking that approach to like just keep trying different things? What would you say to people who might be less interested in doing that sort of an approach?
and I have this conversation a lot with students and asking questions. So I usually tell people, and again, I have to say it a little bit softly, but my statement to a lot of people who are questioning like, oh, I don't know, or I'm getting nervous about change. Some people don't like change. That is totally a reality. That's probably good for the world that less people like change. There shouldn't be many of me around, in my opinion. But what I tell students a lot of times is like, the answer is no until you ask. until you try, until you put a toe out, until you sample something. And, honestly, like asking the question does not indicate you have to make a step in that direction.
Yeah.
Asking the question is allowing your brain to expand into that, to sample into somebody that maybe that's a relationship change, maybe that's a job change, maybe that's a living situation change, maybe that's just a perspective change and you need to go talk to a counselor or another friend. But to me, I think people do get scared that if they ask the question, they may get an answer that will propel them in a direction that they may or may not be ready for. And that's okay. And I think all of us have to learn when to ask questions. Timing, I think, is everything in a lot of scenarios. But for me, I think when I get to those points and I watch friends or even patients, right, or colleagues get to these parts of like this, almost like a little bit of a back and forth, going forward and backward, but not really a direction. I will sometimes offer that of like, what's there to lose? Like, what's your quality of life now to indicate that you're okay to stay where you're at? And if the answer is, actually, I'm pretty okay, like I'm a 7 out of 10 quality of life, cool. You have some questions. Maybe there's some different perspectives you need to offer. But like I had a patient one time say, oh, I'm at 3 out of 10. And we were having a really hard discussion about like, hey, why aren't you wanting to make this choice that actually could improve your quality of life? So when I asked her for a number, she gave 3, and she just looked at me like, I should do what we're talking about. And I was like, I mean, it seems reasonable.
Yeah, so you're definitely tapping into something we use a lot in the coaching industry, which is a life wheel assessment, which does exactly that. It just puts a little bit of data behind where you're thinking, and sometimes that can trigger your mind to think about things in a totally different way, right? Where you say, oh, if I put a number on it and go, wait a minute, that doesn't look so great. But you said something that I really love there, and I agree with you 100%, is just asking questions and getting more information. When you're stuck and you're questioning and you're not sure what to do, it's okay to ask questions to get that information, but that does not commit you. So you said that it doesn't commit you to the answer one way or the other. It just gives you more information. I love that you said that. So that was great.
And I think it's good to get a wide sample. For me, for some people, more information can actually produce more anxiety. For me, it actually lessens. So that's not good for everybody, but I want all of it on the table so that I can see. So I oftentimes will ask a lot of opinions from people. And probably the feedback from friends are like, oh, you didn't listen to me, which totally, but I want people's opinions because it makes me think about my own scenario in a different way. And so I think even when people ask for advice or ask for opinions, or you decide to give opinions or advice to friends with or without asking them or whatever, to me, it's all about like, how is that helping me think through what I am going to ultimately have to decide for myself.
Right.
In that way.
Right. And this is, again, we're talking about people who might be questioning their current situation and they're not sure what they should do here. And what I'm hearing you say is feel free to reach out to people and talk to people about it and just ask them straight up, what is your opinion as an outsider looking in on my life? And just being prepared, though, to receive whatever they say to you, right? You've got to be open to hear that.
Yeah. So we're in that boat together. We all have lots of questions. The world right now is so topsy-turvy that I think the absence of those discussions, I mean, it's gonna be known as the grand shuffle. Like the people in our, I think, decade on one side or the other, where there's been a lot of career changes, and I think, or not, that's fine, but I do think the dialogue is really important for what is happening on a global level. And I think the more we talk about the idea of change, when you introduce that in an organization, for patients, for friends, everyone's initial response in general, I think, is usually like, oh God, this is terrible. This is going to be bad.
Yeah, it's always resistance first. There's a whole change curve that we could talk about here.
Probably come from a lot of history of people inducing change that ultimately we didn't have choice over or ended up impacting us in a negative way. But I think for the things that we can control in our life, the idea of change, if we could twist it a little bit, couldn't be positive, right, for the direction that we want to go in.
So that was going to be my next question is how do you actually embrace change, or how do you handle change? Because it seems like with everything that you've done in your life, you're not afraid of it. Maybe I'm misreading here, but what's your approach to change?
Probably too fast, but I have to slow down, and I really do like depend on close friends and family for those insights, because I definitely go too fast often. I'm getting better in my old age, but I heavily rely on other people's insight into my life. I probably should do a better job of telling them that. But that to me is huge, is having that community. And I realize that not everyone has that community. Not everyone feels safe, even with one person. And that is a huge privilege. I see that every day in medicine. And so I think the idea of change for people can be very unsettling. And if there's not a sense of safety in some area of anyone's life, change is the worst idea ever. And that totally makes sense. I think for me, though, how I manage change is to do a little bit too much at one time. But for me, I feel more comfortable almost tossing everything in the air, because doing one thing isn't going to be good enough for me. I don't know how else to explain that. I've probably done that like twice or three times in my life already. This last year was probably the most significant one. But for me, it's like all the silverware on the table that you need to throw up in the air and you hope it settles back down in one spot. I need all of it to change, because I have a different perspective, a different outlook.
Yeah, so first I'm going to backtrack for like 30 seconds there. You stole the words right out of my mouth. When it comes to change, creating a safe space for that change to occur. I'm actually giving a presentation to an organization next week on exactly that topic. So stealing my words right out of my mouth there. So I love that. First is, even though people like you, people like me, we dive into change, we make these things, we throw the silverware in the air, but we've still created a safe space for us to be able to be open to doing that first. And with you, you said it was creating community with friends and family and loved ones, so that even though everything else might be all over the place, you've still got that sort of grounding support for you. Does that sound right?
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
We are not an island. Sometimes we
Yeah.
like to think about us being islands. I definitely preferred myself as an island for a long time, but I realized a lot of my freedoms, a lot of my choices, a lot of my ability to potentially fly about was because other people were rooted and sticking to what they did best, for whatever that scenario was. It's not a better or worse than, but there is an appreciation of that. I might be super adaptable. Like right now, I'm house sitting in a really cool place and cooking an 87-year-old a meal. I can do that and go to work tomorrow and spend the night somewhere else, and it does not bother me. It doesn't change. It just is. And I love that, because I love the variety of life. However, I can also do that because I have another place to stay, because I have family and friends that I choose to be around and participate with in a safe way.
Yeah. And I mean, it's so important to build community. It's something I've been working on this past year as well, to actually get people that can tether you whenever you fly off. So it's kind of nice to have that. But the other thing I heard you say is that sometimes you have to almost force a new perspective on yourself. So you just mess everything up basically, because when you're in the middle of it, sometimes you can't really see the full picture here. So tell me a little bit more about changing perspectives.
Yeah, I think the scenario so last year, and I'll just do a brief on that. So last year, when I was coming to the end of like, it was a bad work situation. It was in the middle of COVID. I'd been bullied for a year and a half. It was a really unsafe environment. I was being gaslit, like all the bad words. And I learned a lot about them. And so now I know about them. But I finally had to be like, I actually can't go and see a human. I took 2 weeks off because I could not function in a state of just humanity. I don't know how else to
Wow.
say that. But within those 2 weeks, I started focusing on like what are my avenues? Like, what do I have to change? So I'm a really good like sticky note situation. It's like covered my floor. And so one was change jobs, change living situations, change locations, go back to school. Like there was a lot of things that were, oriented around me personally, like where do I need to go? And
Mm-hmm.
ultimately every avenue that I started bumping into didn't move. Like the idea after it wasn't moving. And so I woke up one morning and the thing that came out in my thoughts was like, let go. And I had to leave. It was so clear that there was not even an argument in my mind about that decision. And I say that because I think I had to allow myself space to let go, space
Mm-hmm.
to leave. And only after that I finally got excited. I was like, oh my gosh, I have an endpoint. Oh my gosh, I can pack this up. I need to finish this. Da 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 da. Here's what I need to do. And I was out of my apartment in 2 weeks. Done. Because it was so clear. But I think after that, I then had an appreciation for being in a different perspective. I had to leave. I had to let go before I could ever see all the things that actually needed to change in my life. I needed to do a lot of healing from work. I needed to do healing from the physical isolation and the mental isolation from COVID and being in healthcare and feeling like just all the things that are compounded by that. I needed to get out so that I could see what was going on. And once I did, I actually saw like, oh, I was traumatized at work. Oh, my living situation wasn't great. I was paying too much money. Oh, here's certain friend groups that did or didn't work out anymore. Oh,
Yeah.
I have dated everyone in this fucking city and no one's available, so like there was very much I couldn't see all of that until I
Yeah.
transplanted myself in some way. I don't think that means packing up everything for everybody, but I had to get out so that I could see a bird's eye view of myself to see maybe next steps.
Yeah, and I'm sorry you went through all that. I mean, honestly, it always kind of hurts to hear some of the experiences that we go through. I mean, being a human is hard sometimes.
Lots of
But
I know it all.
yeah, and unfortunately, we learn a lot of hard lessons firsthand sometimes, and it's like you said, we learned all these words, and you're like, I wish I didn't, right? We wish we did. We wish we didn't learn what gaslighting meant and manipulation and all of that sort of thing. But you're kind of circling back though on this idea of just getting a new perspective, an outside perspective, and almost, this is something that I've learned a long time ago, and it's in actually learning how to control our emotions is sort of converting everything to a facts-only view of things where you say, okay, I'm removing myself emotionally from the situation. I'm now able to look at the facts. And that's what we do when we ask our friends too and say, hey, tell us what's going on here. So I think that's a great concept. And I'm hearing that you're using it over and over again to just kind of like, let me just look at the circumstances here just for what they are. And that kind of brings a little bit of clarity to the reality of what's happening sometimes.
Right. And it takes a lot of thought. Like, I've definitely been called impulsive before, but I don't think that's also a fear and judgment, I think, placed on the other person, because
Yeah.
they weren't inside my brain, so they didn't know how long I thought about it. So I think that's something also when people are going through changes or decisions or looking at different things, like it's not our job to say what is or is not like what they're ready for. I think asking questions and then giving that insight for what you're seeing from your perspective is super valuable when people ask for it. But yeah.
Yeah, and one more thing I heard you say too is once you kind of made these choices and you looked at all of this, I heard you say that you got excited. And so I want to talk about that idea because I think that some people forget that you can actually be excited about life and the future. So what
Yeah.
was that like for you when you had that moment?
Freedom! I don't know how else to put it, but it felt lighter. I felt excited. I felt like, I mean, the word no to me is an invitation for opportunity, because that means there's another way. And so finally, I think I'd reached the end of no's that were actually hard stops, that I was like,
Mhm.
oh, like this is now the way through. So yeah, my excitement was around like opportunity. I have more chances. I have different ways to try things on. I'm in a different spot in my personal life and my friend life and my career life. And so like the floodgates just seemed wide open. And I finally realized like I'd been holding that together for a little bit too long. Uh,
Mm.
and yeah,
Yeah. So you went from feeling stuck and bumping into walls in all directions to feeling free, like you actually had just infinite possibilities almost, right?
infinite. And there was definitely some titch of terrified for
Yeah.
sure. Most of it was excitement that it was time. Like it
Yeah.
was necessary time for next steps. And I was glad that I had taken the time. I had walked through the desert long enough, kind of thing. And not that all of it was terrible, right? Like it was just getting to the point where I was like, you know what, my life, I need to make some pretty big adjustments. And
Mhm.
then it just felt light. I felt free. I felt light. I felt like I could fly a little bit more. I wasn't as heavy. My sleep improved. Like
Yeah.
basics. I didn't have to run all the time to wear myself out to not have anxiety, that kind of stuff. To me,
Yeah.
is pretty important.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So with where you're at now, again, you're somewhere in the middle. You're still kind of trialing and testing things.
Yeah.
Where are you now, though, in terms of where you're thinking for the future? When you think about the future, is there a word that comes to mind?
Hmm. I think my future will change every 3 to 5 years. Fully accepted that reality. I think more intentional. I mean, I'm pretty intentional, but more intentional, especially in regards to career and carving
Mhm.
out how best to thrive within environments that are difficult, and trying to find a team that I can work with that's supportive. And I will only work in those scenarios. And if I can't find them, then I will change something else to figure out next steps. But
And that's it, right? You now have defined what is acceptable for you.
yeah, for sure. Yep. And I
Awesome.
have that otherwise. And not perfect. These are not perfect jobs. I don't want anybody hearing like it's not perfect jobs. It's just what's the team that I get to work with to impact the little niche that I want to impact and or be part of and be encouraged by and encourage.
Yep.
Um, and that's what I want, and I hope to find it. And we'll see.
Yeah, and I love that so much that you've now said, this is what I'm looking for, this is what I'm not going to accept for myself, and I'm going to keep trialing and testing and moving forward until I find what works for me.
Yeah, agreed.
Yep.
Hands down.
Awesome. Yeah, for sure. And so I want to point out though too, I noticed that the account that you're joining us from here is called Packlight Adventures. Will you tell us a little bit about that? Because you've talked about being a doctor and working in medicine and you're going to school and you're teaching, but I want to hear a little bit more about this Packlight Adventures.
That's probably my little like fun child thing. After I was like, oh my gosh, I have to quit my job. I love travel. Travel's always been my passion. I make it a priority. I have the privilege to be able to do it. And I realize that that's not available for everybody, but I got to get on airplanes every so often and go explore. I love being in things that are new and I have to figure out. And I love seeing how the world works in different spots. So when I was like, oh, I got to go for whatever reason, the idea was like, oh, I've actually been told I pack light or pack small. So the premise that I encourage people to put less things in a small bag and they will have more fun doing it, and whittling down to the nuts and bolts of being able to travel. Like, why lug stuff around if you don't need it or whatever? So I think it's simplifying travel, simplifying life.
I was going to say, if that's not a metaphor for life, then then I don't know what is. Simplifying down and keeping things light so that you can explore. That's I love that. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that so much. So that's really awesome, and I love that you said it's more your fun part. You know, you've actually carved out a space in your life right now dedicated solely to having more fun, right?
Yes, hands down. Yep. Gotta
And
have work hard, play hard.
yeah, and that's it. It's doable for people who are thinking that this is just life. That's not for me. I don't get to have this. I want to let them know, like, you're allowed to have fun. You're allowed to enjoy life. It's supposed to be fun.
We play as adults, and play looks very different for everybody. So it doesn't have to look similar at all. But there is elements of play that adults lose that, from the doctor's opinion, is not healthy. And I tell myself every day it's not healthy to lose that art of play.
That's right. We got a doctor's opinion right here, everybody. We've all been told we got to have more play in our lives. That's wonderful. So I want to, first of all, thank you again for coming on here and talking. I love hearing your story and what you've been through and what you're currently going through. I want to ask if there's any final words of advice that you would like to give to people who might find themselves questioning or feeling stuck or similar to where you were.
I guess if we were to keep it in the thinker brain, is ask the question, why or why not for change? The answer is no until you try, and do a pros and cons list. I don't know. Mm-hmm. And then do or do not have to make that decision, and it's totally up to you. And that will take different people who have different brains, different amounts of time, and that's fine. And don't listen to everybody. Everybody's opinions, but it's your life.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, it's ultimately your call at the end of the day. You got to follow what feels right for you. So exactly. Awesome. I want to give you a final moment here to talk a little bit more about Packlight, because you are on Instagram. If you want people to follow, just let us know where we can find you.
Oh, you can like it. I do little blurbs on or where I travel. Of course, that's a little bit diminished right now. It's probably more of a hobby. Of course, I would love to expand it. I do have a website, and it's attached in the link bio, so there will be more stuff added. But if you do want to go through and say, oh, how does Hannah pack in one bag for this trip or that trip or whatever, it's all up. It's all posted. It's kind of a little bit of how I look at travel. So if it resonates with you and that makes sense, then there could be some pointers in for that. But the website would probably have more information on it. And then if you want to follow Packlight, then of course I post photos not often enough.
Awesome. Hey, you stay with what you can handle. So awesome. Well, I'm so happy that you were here, that we could have this conversation. Thank you so much for joining me, being a part of my series here. I'm happy to have been able to have this time to talk to you.
Heck yeah. Thanks for having me.
Cool. Yeah, and thank you everybody for joining and watching. You can check the rerun on my page. Have a good night.
Thanks. See ya.
Bye.